feel very called to become a member of the Catholic Church.
Love the Catholic Church. It's just the best place to be.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line. In North America, call toll-free 1-800-585-9396. That's 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
It's finally Friday, the weekend's come. Almost, anyway. How you doing, Colin?
I'm doing pretty good.
Colin Donovan, our Vice President of Theology, is in the house for EWTN's Open Line Friday. If you've got a theology question for Colin, you have at your disposal your very own who can say that? You have at your disposal your very own personal theologian for the next 55 minutes.
It's on Wednesday as well with Father Mick.
Yeah, look at this. You grab one of these phone lines while there still is one at 1-800-585-9396, toll free anywhere in North America. I can't believe it. Our own theologian for the next hour. Outside the United States and Canada, your number's 1-205-271-2985, and we'll put you straight to the front of the line at 1-205-271-2985. You can send us an email, openline@ewtn.com, or you can text your question to Colin. Text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for a response. Text your first name and your question, message, and data rates may apply. I'm Jack Williams, the burly and manly Michael McCall, the furry and manly, Michael McCall's producing the program. He's saying move on.
Exactly.
Matt Gabensky is your call screener, and Jeff Burson back today, our social media maven, and all three of those gentlemen have big, full, bushy beards, and you and I, clean-shaven, just don't quite make. That's why they put us in a room by ourselves.
We're just further removed from the apes, I guess.
1-800-585-9396
if you believe in that,
is indeed our toll-free number. Wow. Okay, I wasn't going to go there. I was going to be a little more subtle, but you just jumped right in with both of your opposably thumbed feet.
Well, I mean, you could argue, too, less manly on not having it, but that's all a matter of perspective, isn't it?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We've got a couple of emails that I better go to before I get myself in any more trouble here. Tom writes in, hello, Colin. A non-Catholic friend referred me to an article on LifeSite News where Archbishop Sarando argued that Pope Francis's Laudato Si is a magisterial document, thereby elevating quote-unquote man-made climate change as doctrinal. This Archbishop's statement appears to equate exacerbating climate change as morally equivalent to abortion. Given the magisterial teaching of Laudato Si on climate change, my friend asked me if it is a sin for a Catholic to not accept man-made climate change as true. Thank you. And that's Tom in Concord, Mass.
Well, the answer to that is yes and no. And now I guess I'm forced to tell you which parts are yes and which parts are no. The yes part is that it is a magisterial document. Excuse me. Because the Pope has issued it. It's a teaching document. It says true things in it, has moral advice, and so on and so forth. But it also has a papal document in general could have disciplinary things in them, could have common references to culture and other things. Nobody would take assertions of that nature to be infallible or magisterial in the sense of emanating from the Church's own authority and her right to declaim on that particular point. And the same is true of science. The Church doesn't have a particular conduit to God to determine whether science is correct or not. If you look historically, for instance, take the Galileo case, the Church's grounds for questioning Galileo was on his assertions regarding the meaning of sacred scripture, an area in which he did not have competence. The Church, for her part, on the science of the Copernican theory and whether the sun was at the center of the universe, or the earth was at the center of the universe and everything revolved around us, This was a scientific question, and frankly, in the day, the scientists themselves, the astronomers, were followers of Ptolemy. And so they were following the system that had been the consensus for 1,500 or more years. So they were simply following the scientific consensus. And as we know, the churches, if you want to ally the church's opinion with that of the scientists of the day, was wrong, and Galileo proved to be right. Because it wasn't a matter of theology, it was a matter of science. So it's quite possible that the scientists of today could be wrong, regardless of what the question is, and you could say the opposition be correct, or the outside scientific opinion be the correct one. Science will sort that out on its own. So any of the scientific statements or the bases within the document which have a scientific foundation are to be judged by scientific criteria, and the Pope doesn't have the authority, and certainly doesn't intend to, make affirmation of the truth content of the scientific statements, which are not within the Church's prerogative to do that, nor does it have the apparatus to make that kind of a judgment. Now, the moral things, what are our obligations with regard to stewardship of the environment? Those general principles are certainly valid and taught by the Church. Now, you can't necessarily say that particular content like that is ex cathedra and infallibly true, but what he has done is he has attempted to apply basic Catholic moral principles regarding our obligations to the poor, to stewardship. And because many of those decisions are very complex decisions, these are not infallible judgments because they're practical applications. So again, it falls to science, it falls to the politicians, to the citizens in democracy, to make the judgment as to whether to follow particular advice as how to mitigate climate issues, whether it's getting warmer or colder or more storms or fewer storms or drought or whatever it is. How we deal with that as human beings generally ends up being a political decision for the most part. So the Pope, although he references those things, he's not trying to teach those infallibly. He simply can't. It's not within the Catholic mindset and intellectual history to be able to do that. But where he's making a moral point, it is something we need to consider. What are we doing? If the earth is filling up with garbage, what are we trying to do to mitigate that? If we ourselves are in a way to mitigate or are responsible for putting heavy metal pollutants into the waters, what are we doing to do? We have moral obligations from Catholic teaching, and therefore from the natural law and the divine law, and certainly as taught by the Church, to these kinds of matters. The particular application and how to get to an objective in environmental care is going to be a multitude of factors, including political, economic, and indeed the human ones. And so we should give it our best attention, and we should be serious and intent of following the moral law, whether we agree with this politician's or that politician's or this scientist or that scientist's view of how to get there. We still should not simply say, oh, we can do anything we want. We just, use the environment as we please. This would be a position which would be entirely contradictory to Catholic teaching.
I don't like the way you looked at me when you said the world was filling up with garbage, just so you know. Just getting started on an open line Friday. 1-800-585. You're not denying it either. That bothers me even more. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. 1-800. Our YouTube viewers are going to love that.
Yes.
1-800-585-9396. Open line Friday.
EWTN News Nightly with Lauren Ashburn.
If you're a Catholic and you're watching cable news or network news, you're getting your news on the internet, how often do you read Catholic-based stories? Not that often. Here at News Nightly, you can get the national news with a Catholic perspective, and it is so valuable for Catholics to be able to see the world through that perspective.
EWTN News Nightly with Lauren Ashburn. Weekdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Podcasting is an easy way to automatically receive your favorite EWTN programs on your mobile device. Visit EWTN.com/podcast. and enjoy your favorite EWTN shows on your mobile phone right now.
Here's Peggy Normandin chatting with Catholics.
I am walking up the steps to Holy Redeemer Catholic Elementary School. It's a 108-year-old Catholic grammar school in North Portland, Oregon. And the third grade class has invited me to come in and ask these young Catholic students if they think they'd like to become a saint.
I think I'd want to be a saint, but I would also like to be a veterinarian since I love animals.
Have you heard of St. Francis of Assisi?
Mm-hmm.
He loved the animals too. You know, he tamed wild wolves. He talked to the birds talked to him.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to be a saint, but I kind of want to be an artist, maybe.
You don't think you can be a saint and an artist?
I could, but...
You look like you could be a very talented artist, but you also look like you've got a little saint in you. I see it.
Thank you.
Call Me Catholic with Peggy Normandin. Saturdays at 1 and 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
This is Matthew Bunson, co-host of Register Radio.
This is Lauren Ashburn, EWTN News Nightly anchor and managing editor.
This is Archbishop Robert Carlson, the Archbishop of St. Louis. Thanks for listening to EWTN Radio.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
Still one line open at 1-800-585-9396. That's toll free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. Our leadoff hitter today is Suzanne. She's in Midland, Texas, listening to EWTN on Guadalupe Radio, and Midland is where Guadalupe Radio all started. Now nearly 40 stations, but it all started in Midland. Suzanne, you're on with Colin.
Hello, and thank you so much for being the theologian at our fingertips and for taking my phone call.
You're very welcome. What's your question today, dear?
Okay, so yesterday I received in the mail a letter from my priest. It was addressed to me and then other women who are involved as extraordinary ministers for communion, or my particular ministry is I play the piano or sing at Mass. And so recently I began to wear the veil to church, and so I kept it. I have it on when I'm in front. And so the extraordinary ministers for communion were wearing a veil also, and some have been doing it for some time. And the priest has said now that he cited some stuff since Vatican II, and that he doesn't want us wearing the veil if we're going to be involved in ministry. So, you know, it's awkward, and I haven't been a Catholic for very long. My husband and I came into the church 7 years ago, and we became as involved in the Catholic Church as we were in the Lutheran Church, and so we like to serve, but I want to obey my priest, but I want to make sure that he's on solid footing.
Okay. Well, as you're sort of between a rock and a hard place, I personally think you should be free to do that. I can't imagine what there would be as a bias. There is no obligation to wear the veil on the part of women. Before Vatican II, this was the case. Paul VI did away with that, but women are at liberty to do it, obviously, and many do. They have taken that up as a sign of submission to the Lord, and that's their right to make that pious act. However, just as the bishop for the diocese and the pastor for the parish are sort of moderators of the liturgy in their particular context, the parish or the diocese as a whole, yes, you should obey him, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't come to him with good arguments and even appeal beyond him. That is also your right. And here's the arguments I would make. It's not forbidden by the church. In fact, the church is very tolerant of pious expressions. We look, charismatics raise their hands. More traditional women wear the veil. There are all kinds of ways in which people express their piety. You know, some do a very formal hands in front of their chest during prayer, or others could stand and have their hands in their pockets. It's a matter of a personal choice there. So I think one thing that Vatican II did not want to do was certainly to make everybody lockstep in that respect. So citing Vatican II and the changes since Vatican II, to me, is actually works in your favor. The liberty that is given to the person, the individual, to decide those own personal expressions of piety, which don't conflict with our common postures during the Mass, and so on and so forth. So, on the one hand, yes, you should follow the pastor, and I think on the other hand, you have a right to address this with him, that you think this should be an option for yourself and the other women. And even to lay it at the feet of the bishop, say, Father, well, I appreciate your point of view, but I intend to lay this problem at the foot of the bishop and let him decide and go by that decision. In a way, you would even have a bit of a greater obligation because you are serving in a liturgical capacity at the Mass, and so he may see a need for certain uniformity there. That could be a possibility, and he'll have his arguments and his reasons. It is certainly not the law, however. The fact that the Church did not repromulgate in the Code of Canon Law the norm regarding veils did not take away the right to wear veils. The Church did also not promulgate that men sit on one side of the church and women sit on the other. But if all the men one day went in and sat on the other one side, and all the women voluntarily went in and sat on the other, what would be the point of getting upset? Now, you've got to mingle together. The Church did away with this kind of segregation, which had, of course, a long history with the Jews, and they still do that in the more Orthodox synagogues. I don't believe in America that was ever done, but it was in the Code of Canon Law until 1983, although bishops' conferences could relax that for the sake of their pastoral context, and in the U.S. we did not have that. So I think the absence of a former law does not mean that people can't still follow those practices. So I would be curious to get a better explanation from him and to argue your points as to why you want to do it, and see if he will accept those.
I'm not advocating one way or another on this particular issue or this particular circumstance, but there is some virtue in uniformity in these matters.
There is, but
especially when I think to posture of servers and things like that.
For the ministers in the sanctuary, yes, there's the vestments and the things like that, and that may be part of his argument. I don't know. But we don't regulate, other than issues of modesty. I recently saw a Eucharistic minister, a younger woman with a very short skirt. I hope that somebody responsible for running that ministry brought that to her attention. But other than points like modesty in that, we don't say now everybody has to wear green dresses and khaki pants today. So I'm not sure why the veil, except that some priests are threatened by those who have a more traditional sensibility and piety. That may not be the reason. It may be the uniform reason, and that's something she'd have to find out from him.
Is that helpful, Suzanne?
It is. He suggested that we were drawing attention to ourselves and not to Christ, and that's not so, because I know the women that have done this have done this as in an act of submission and humility. And wearing a veil, if you spend any time on your hair as a woman, if you're going to put a veil on top of it, you know that you're not trying to draw attention to yourself. Mm-hmm. So but yes, that's been
and I would.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, I would even question the presumption of guessing at somebody's motivation.
Yeah. God bless you, Suzanne. We appreciate the phone call. Next stop for us is Wenatchee, Washington. Julie is in the great state of Washington listening to EWTN. Julie, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, I've been talking to a Protestant friend of mine, and we're talking about, the historic authority of the Catholic Church and the Pope specifically. Mm-hmm. And she asked me, is it possible to remove the Pope from his office for moral misconduct? Now, I told her I didn't think so, and I told her I'd find out, but I think her sense of justice wants the answer to be yes. And if the answer is no, what are the good reasons that we have for not, being able to do that?
Sure. Well, the good reason is that the hierarchical nature of the church reflects the hierarchical order of creation and even the hierarchical order in the Holy Trinity. The Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are equal as persons, but we all know that the Son comes from the Father and the Holy Spirit. So there is not a hierarchy of nature and authority so much as, what the Father wills, the Son is the expresses, and the Holy Spirit brings about. The whole of creation is hierarchical, and I know that's not common to express that view in an anti-patriarchal view, but in fact some of the movements today are direct consequences of the recognition that the universe is patriarchal in the sense of the Father in heaven. And so if you're going to rebel against the Father in heaven, you rebel against the hierarchical order that nature itself has, that the family has, and so on and so forth. So some of that is built in. In that respect, the Pope is the vicar of Christ. He is appointed by Christ. Christ determines when and how long he serves. He can resign if he feels he needs to, and Pope Benedict said that he reached that conclusion in prayer, and that he was confident that that was the right one, and therefore that was God's will. But other than that, the only authority who can remove him is Christ. And that doesn't mean that Christ says, well, I'm going to let the Austrian army or Napoleon and the French army do it on my behalf. Providentially, that may happen and the Pope dies or whatever. But I wouldn't say that would be the will of God. But in terms of human tribunals, there are none. It's part of the theology of the church, it's part of the code of canon law of the church, that no one, in fact, judges the Roman pontiff. And by that mean judges, we can make practical conclusions that, well, we don't think the science in Laudato Si, as a previous, as an emailer mentioned, is the best view of the situation. That's a judgment, obviously, but we're not saying we stand over the Pope and are able to cast him aside or remove him or reject his authority. Nobody can do that on earth, even the cardinals. They are the electors, they are advisors, they vote one time and their job is done. They don't get to vote again and undo that job. The Lord will do it in his own good time.
If it could be done, it would have been done by now, because we've had a couple scoundrels run through the seat of Peter in days gone by.
Well, it's been attempted, because groups of cardinals have said, typically for political and national or even familial reasons, that, this pope is an affront to our house. We go off and we vote in another pope. And then we ended up with 3 popes at one point in the 1300s. That's not the will of God either. So, no, even the cardinals, when they have tried to use arms to do it, did so wrongly, and we call them in. They elected anti-popes.
Does that help, Julie?
It's very helpful. Thank you so much.
God bless you. We
You're
appreciate the phone call. That frees up a line for you at 1-800-585-9396. It's toll-free anywhere in North America, 1-800-585-9396. That's the number Sarah used. She's in San Antonio, Texas, listening to EWTN Radio. Sarah, you're on with Colin.
Hi, I had a question. It was almost like the other question about the priest. We have a new priest that is making everyone stand right after communion because he doesn't like the kneelers going up and down, and he said that everyone, according to the germ, like GERN or something, is supposed to be doing it, and all the other priests are wrong, and that everyone in the world is supposed to be doing this.
Well, I would direct them to the general instruction of the Roman Missal, issued by the United States Bishops' Conference and confirmed by the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, dated the year 2002, in other words, the one that we're operating under. Paragraph number 43. In describing in a general way the postures that are used in the Mass, it says, The faithful should stand from the beginning of the entrance chant or while the priest approaches the altar until the end of the collect, that's the opening prayer, for the Alleluia chant before the gospel, while the gospel itself is proclaimed, during the profession of faith and the prayer of the faithful, and from the invitation, pray brethren, before the prayer over the offerings until the end of Mass, except at the places indicated below. And the next paragraph of that, number 43, it says, they should, however, sit while the readings before the gospel and the responsorial psalm are proclaimed, and for the homily, and while the preparation of the gifts at the offertory is taking place, and as circumstances allow, they may sit or kneel while the period of sacred silence after communion is observed. So when they return from their receiving of communion, they can do their thanksgiving either sitting or kneeling. And obviously, if the church is crowded and some are standing, they can do it by necessity standing. And this was brought to the Holy See at one point because pastors were doing exactly what you described early on in this process, and Rome made it clear what choice they make is theirs, and they're free to do it.
Paragraphs 43 and 44 of the Germ. Open Line Friday rolls on with Colin Donovan.
Encounter with Dan DeMatte and Patrick Rice is our new radio show for young adults.
The Holy Spirit is about a new and exciting work in the young church of today. On Encounter, we bring young adults the life-changing testimonies of ordinary people that launch them into lives of extraordinary mission. Their testimonies bring faith and power into the lives of everyone who listens.
Encounter with Dan DeMatte and Patrick Rice. The spiritual awakening begins tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome to EWTN's Catholic Almanac.
Today is August 11th, the memorial of St. Clare of Assisi, virgin and founder of the Order of Poor Clares. She and her nuns depended on God and alms for their sustenance. She continued to lead the order until her death in 1253. She loved the Mass, and an image of the Mass appeared each day on the wall by her bedside when she was too sick to attend. Because of this, she is the patron of television workers.
Living the Beatitudes with Father Bjorn.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. While purity is an important virtue, a lot of times we can confuse this beatitude for a discussion about sexual morality. To be pure in heart is to be completely focused on and in love with God. God has given us an invitation deep within us to share in His own divine life. But it's important that we choose to focus on Him and respond to that invitation. In a homily on the Mount of Beatitudes in 2000, St. John Paul the Great says that we are called to have an urgent response to choose between life and death. In one of the earliest known Christian documents on morality, the Didache, it says there are two ways, one of life and one of death, and between the two ways is a great difference. God has called us to be focused on Him and His love. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
You know, our Vice President of Theology, Colin Donovan, is going to be in the hospital with his little champion.
Yeah, some teeth work.
Part
of his
little dental surgery
problems,
next week for Colin. So he won't be here, so we're going to record a mailbag program for next Friday right after we're finished here. So if you're holding on the line at the end of the program, just stay right there and we'll take your question on the air live as part of our recording for this mailbag for next week. So stick on the line if you're there at the end of the program, and we will, right after the top of the hour, pick you up and have you be part of that program. The number, once again, 1-800-585-9396, toll free anywhere in North America, 1-800-585-9396. Next up is Jerry. He is in Levittown, New York, listening on Sirius XM Channel 130. Jerry, what's your question today for Colin?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. Thank you, Colin. Appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, great service. So the question is about what? Just drew a blank if that's possible. The vanities. I'm sorry. So the question is about vanity and capital sin, and to what level can one then say, let's say, vices, where a person might need a car, but buys a nicer car than he might need, or one might need to eat, but one then goes to luxurious, restaurants.
Sure.
Where they're, kind of like materialistic. But to what level can one say, buying shoes is a vanity when, we all need to wear shoes? So my question is really I'm trying to define for my own self or for whoever else is interested, into what level can we say, these necessities of life can actually then become vanities.
Yeah, and I think this is for us in the West. All the recent popes have cautioned us against materialism and consumerism. The idea being that when we have a lot of, when our income exceeds what is needed, we tend to want to spend that on nice stuff, a better vacation, maybe a second home. At what point can this be consumerism or materialism? Some of that, of course, is at the level of intention. You can have legitimate reasons for doing things. Under St. Thomas Aquinas, in talking about modesty, he's not asking kings and princes or popes and bishops to set aside their garments of office that may tend to be a little nicer than other people's, or we don't ask the President of the United States to go around in rags. He represents us. They represent others. The modesty for them includes dressing according to their station in life and their role and function in society. Likewise, a workman doesn't go to work in some physical labor dressed in a tuxedo or something. He dresses appropriately to his station in life, the work that he's doing at the moment, and so on. So there are a lot of questions. It's suited to us as a people, as a representative of us, that the president has a nice home, is well provided for, and all of that, and that our bishop as well lives, of course, according to the gospel and modest circumstances and so on, and because a workman is worth his hire and so on. So all of these are considerations. So on that level, it's not a black and white situation. It's circumstantial and it's intentional. The intentional part would be, are we doing this, sort of a mindless materialism, simply to have, and to have more than our neighbors, and to have more than others, and to be applauded for our wealth and for our excess and all of that. So there the element of intention can come in. And even a rich man can do that and get into, a moral issue from that point of view. And presumably a poor man, too, could do that, because we can always compare ourselves to our neighbor and set ourselves above our neighbor and do all of that. But as for what is a virtue and a vice, it really doesn't have to do with the category of sin, but the ease with which we do it. A virtue is something that, say, take patience, or long-sufferingness, or temperance, or whatever it is. It's something that we do it consistently. We've done it so many times that it's ingrained in us. It's second nature, as philosophers speak of it. So it's ingrained in us. On the other end of the spectrum, if we do a particular sin, or we fall into a particular fault consistently again and again and again, so that it becomes easy, like falling off a log, that's a vice. And that's whether it's something light like gossip or whatever it is, or something grave like murder or sexual sin or theft or whatever. So virtue and vice are sort of the two poles of moral action: the ease with which we do good things on one hand, and the ease with which we do evil things on the other hand, or sinful things at least, because we have done them so many times it's second nature. And then you get into, as I noted earlier, the intention attention. Why do we do this? And also the circumstances. What is our station in our office? You would say it would be irresponsible for a father of a family to not take reasonable care of his family and his material circumstances and his survivors if something should happen to him. We have to take a reasonable amount of care while still trusting in God ultimately and his providence. And so everybody has a different responsibility. But then you take the friars here, they live in common, they don't need a lot, then therefore that they don't have that same kind of obligation. Mother Angelica, of course, was very good at trusting in divine providence, and yet never missed a payday either, which is really remarkable. So our circumstances in life mean a lot, but as to virtue or vice, that's a pretty simple reasoning. Do we do good things easily and well because we've done them often, or do we do sinful things quickly and easily because we've done those sinful things again and again and again in the past?
Stands to reason our Lord would want to have representatives in all sectors of life, wouldn't he?
It does. In this way, we can, by being virtuous people, we can be representatives to rich, middle class, poor, to labor, lawyer, any class of person, professional or non-professional, simply by trying to live virtuously the circumstances and responsibilities of our life.
Betty is in Stanley, North Dakota, watching on YouTube. Hi, Betty. You're on with Colin Donovan.
Hi.
Hello, Betty.
Hi, Colin. See, my question is, we just went on vacation, and close by to where we were visiting, there is a shrine, and it has been debunked, I guess is what you'd call it. They said the woman faked her visions, and we're not allowed to go there. And but it's still advertised. I mean, there's signs up, and you can go in. And and I had read an article that said, "Do not go here because if you even step foot on the land, you could be excommunicated from the church." And I was telling my husband about this. And I said, we can't even go visit there. And he said, "Well, you can't even just walk in and look around or look at the statues, or not go as a pilgrimage, but just go as a tourist." And just look at it. And I said, well, I don't know. I read that you cannot even step foot in there, or you could be, if you knowingly do it and you know that you can be excommunicated, then you can be excommunicated from the church. So I'm just wondering if what I read was valid, or, and then my second part of that is, well, we did visit it one time after it had been debunked, and I didn't know anything about that. So
I'm a little nervous just having you on the air right now, Betty.
Well, you're afraid the lightning won't fall very far from the tree. Well, first of all, the church doesn't typically throw excommunications around with regard to apparition sites. There may be exceptions to that I'm not aware of. You can't be excommunicated if you don't know you're going to be excommunicated. There are certain things in canon law that can acquire an excommunication. Going to apparition sites, approved or not approved, is not mentioned. The bishop, of course, has the authority to place restrictions on it. Typically, it's a little less severe than an excommunication. What it would be forbidding people to go to a place if that was done, and to do that knowingly would be a kind of disobedience, and so there would be confessable sin there, not excommunication. So it depends a lot on what was actually done, and I don't know of any such circumstances. You're free to tell me the place or not, but I suspect it's highly unlikely that there is an excommunication on wherever it is, and that's simply generally not the way it works. So, I don't know what else to tell you. I wouldn't lose any sleep over it, because certainly even if there was, one of the excuses is, I didn't know I could be excommunicated. The church is not trying to catch you in doing something secretly. Now, if it was widely publicized and there was a ban and there was some penalty that the bishop of the place or potentially even the Holy See were slapping on, interdicting, as it's called, those who go to a particular place, then I think you would know about it. It would be publicized. You'd be responsible for adhering to it. But I just can't imagine where in the world, literally, that might be today. I know of no such place.
Does that put your mind at ease, Betty?
Well, yeah, I feel better now. And we did go to it. And we did go to a valid shrine while we were on vacation. So that.
Listen, this is not a ledger system, Betty. Come on now.
Yeah, I need a balancing bad one with a good one. Well, I'm glad you went, because we're always better off following the church rather than our own opinion. If the church discourages it, there's probably a reason for it, even if we don't understand the canonical or theological or pastoral reasons why. It's just part of humility to say, okay, I don't really know enough about this to trump the authority of the church, so I'm going to obey the church.
And I think you get a lot of brownie points for living in God's country, North Dakota, Betty.
That's right next to Saskatchewan, so of course.
That's right. God bless you, Betty. We appreciate the phone call. You know, EWTN recently hired J.D. Flynn to be the
We did. I met him. Seems like a very nice
very
guy.
Sharp guy. New editor-in-chief of the Catholic News Agency. He's got a big job ahead of him because the CNA is the only fast, reliable, free Catholic news source that brings blogs, stories, opinions, and more to your fingertips. For the latest Catholic news, visit CatholicNewsAgency.com. It's an online service from EWTN News, and keep Mr. Flynn in your prayers. Next up for us is Michael, not Michael McCall, our producer, but Michael in Dallas, Texas, listening to EWTN Radio. Michael, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Yes, Colin, my question is that if you are coming from Judaism and you're accustomed to wearing a kippah on your head, is it unlawful for you to do that in the Catholic Church, or is that permissible? Or
I wouldn't say it's unlawful. Again, there's a lot of custom in this. These are customary things. It used to be women wore the hats. I remember my mother reaching and getting tissue paper out of her purse because she forgot her hat at home. So that's customary. The custom thing in all of the Christian churches and in European civilization, of which we are an extension in this continent, has been, men take off their hats in places of special places, in churches and other such contexts. I don't think there would be. It would certainly raise questions, especially if you went to communion, if the people didn't know you. But other than that, you would probably get a lot of questions. But is it wrong? Is it forbidden? That would be saying too much, I think. The bishop, essentially the kippah or the yarmulke in Judaism is the zaketo used by the clergy. There may be a Jewish connection there, or it's simply that the monks with the tonsure, their heads got cold and putting a piece of cloth up there started the practice of keeping it warm that way. I don't know. I suspect that there is a connection with Jewish tradition in that. The bishop wears it. He takes it off at the consecration. If you've noticed, during the Eucharistic prayer, the bishop will always lay his zaketo on the altar or give it to an assistant to take away until later. Likewise with the mitre and the other headgear of the clergy, they're not used during the most solemn parts of the Mass. So if you choose to do it, that might be a thing to do at that time.
Do we not have a Jewish convert who hosts a program on EWTN that wears it?
Rob Fishman?
Yeah.
Or Bob? Does he go by Bob or Rob?
I think he goes by Bob.
I think he goes by Bob. Yeah, I mean, he might have some information. You might. There is also the Hebrew Catholic Association.
Association of Hebrew Catholics.
Or Association of Hebrew Catholics. I believe they're still in Kentucky, are they?
I thought he was in St. Louis, David Moss.
In St. Louis, no, David Moss. That would be a source of information. I would say there are two extremes there. Of course, in the New Testament, it argues against Judaizing, which simply meant that seeing an obligation to all of the old customs, the cultic and otherwise. But what the Hebrew Catholics have tried to do in the church is to find those things which are legitimate cultural expressions of their people, the way the Irish and the Polish and others, and then to sort of meld those with Catholic practice. That would be a very good thing for you to look into, I think, because they have many of them, of course, have been in the church for a very long time now. It's been around for 40 or 50 years at least. And they would have a lot of ideas and a lot of guidance for you. So it's the Association of Hebrew Catholics. I'm sure they have an internet site too.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Next up is Annie in Kansas City, Missouri, listening to EWTN on KEXS. Annie, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Hi, I was just wondering, my son, he said that he went to a Catholic light school. And I was like, Catholic light, what do you mean? Your religion teacher was really good. And he said, yeah, Mom, she was good, but like when we talk about the saints, she wouldn't say how the saints died, like if they had their head cut off or if they were boiled alive. That's Catholic light. And I was like, whoa.
Maybe she was just squeamish.
And so I just wondered your thoughts on that. I met you like 30 years ago, so your brother. This is Annie.
Yeah, no,
you told me you were 29.
Yeah.
How did somebody meet you 30 years ago?
I don't know, but it's possible. I guess Catholic light, I mean, that's a term that's been used sometimes for more liberal parishes and schools. It simply means that a lot of the older pious practices of Catholics, like prayer to Our Lady, which is not just a devotional, but recommended by all the popes, recommended by the Second Vatican Council, as is devotion to the saints, recommended by the Second Vatican Council. So I would argue that sometimes if that's their definition of Catholic light, it might be more non-Catholic, because that's something that Protestants do. You could maybe call it Protestant heavy instead of Catholic light. So I'm not sure that that's a good term. There is a way of being Catholic: devotion to the saints, the rosary, the scapular, votive lamps, uses of statues and images and icons. These are all Catholic. These are all of long-standing use in the church. They were not thrown out by Vatican II, although in certain ecclesiastical cultures during my lifetime, and probably still surviving in some places, they were frowned upon, and there was even persecution 30, 40 years ago. I've seen that done. I've been the victim of it, for being faithful, for using what some might refer to as traditional Catholicism, but in reality are all things recommended by the popes and even the Second Vatican Council. With regard to Mary and the saints, I would recommend two documents: the Second Vatican II document on the liturgy, Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, and the Second Vatican II dogmatic Constitution on the Church. And in there is a beautiful section at the end of that document on devotion to Our Lady, which affirms all of these points as right in the heart of the church and not at the peripheries and the edges of the church. The ones who are in the peripheries and the edges and who need to be brought back to the center, in the words of our Holy Father, are those who deny that these things are Catholic elements, deny purgatory, deny prayer for the poor souls, canonize people upon their death rather than praying for them. This is simply not Catholic. It's not Catholic light at all. So you have to be very discerning, because a lot of people have a wrong idea of what the Second Vatican Council taught. And the antidote to that is to actually read the documents and understand them, or to read the Catechism of the Catholic Church and see how many references to the Vatican Council there are, to realize that Pope Pius XII, for example, is with St. Augustine, the two most cited people in the Second Vatican II documents, that there is a continuity of tradition here, rightly understood, and that Catholic light is simply not Catholic. That's the best way I can put it.
We head now to Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Tony is in Toronto, listening to EWTN Radio. Tony, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Hello, it's Tony from Toronto. Yes.
Hey, Tony.
Thanks for having me on your show.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, anyways, I had a question about accountability in the church in general. Mm-hmm. So, basically, all the problems that we've seen through the centuries, through the years, and even like there's a caller who talked about a priest that had an issue with her having a headscarf.
Sure.
Like, it comes down to accountability. If we don't have a structure whereby we can put people accountable, then we will never get anywhere. It seems like the priests, some of them have too much power, or not too much power, but they abuse their power. And like we need to have a structure whereby we allow, like any corporation allows for accountability. And with modernization, like we have tools like social media and everything else, there should be a way for congregation members to log their issues.
Well, there are, in fact. I would make one distinction. The church is not a corporation, and I know you're just giving that as an example of systems of accountability, and from that point of view, that's legitimate. But the church, if the reason we call our priest father is the same reason we call our natural dads father. There is a relationship there, and of course, generally, relationships are those where, the first people you don't call are the police or the FBI or others. There is in the sense of the family a way to resolve problems. And so the church has that sense, but it's quite clear that, as you mentioned, if somebody gets too big for their britches, a priest or anybody in the church who has an official capacity, there is somebody always higher to them, or except as we explained earlier, the Pope. There is someone higher to him too, but not as, well, I guess as immediately available if you consider prayer. So we do have those systems. The pastor is responsible to the parish council. This is set out in canon law. So the members of the parish council have some input to that. A parish council on a more serious matter is appealing to the bishop, I would think would be very effective, because at that point it's not just sour grapes, but it's a substantial criticism to get major participants in the life of the parish to bring a problem to the bishop. So there are structures. There are structures for bringing the bishops to task through the sacred congregations. The canon law gives Catholics the right to do that, and formally gives them the right in the Code of Canon Law that to have their pastoral needs addressed, and when they're not addressed, to have that fact addressed, to do all of that. And in point of fact, the bishop is the immediate superior not just of the bishop, but of the priest, and of the deacons, and of every single Catholic, because his authority is said to be not only supreme, but ordinary to every Catholic in the world. In other words, every Catholic is permitted to appeal directly to the Holy See with problems as necessary. So it's not a perfect system, but what human system is perfect, but it does bring in accountability, which should start with the family relationship. Father, I've got a gripe. Can we work this out? And I don't want to have to go to the bishop, but I will. So there are ways to do it formally, but we should do it in the family wherever possible.
And in Cincinnati, if you'll hold on the line right after the top of the hour, we will tape our mailbag program, and we will lead things off with you if you can hang in there with us until that time. On behalf of our host, Colin Donovan, producer Michael McCall, call screener Matt Gubensky, and our social media maven, Mr. Jeff Burson, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks for another great week on EWTN's Open Line. Back at it Monday with John Martinoni, apologist extraordinaire. Until then, have a great weekend. God bless.